Perform log searches in Azure Log Analytics. Let's talk a bit more about the Log Analytics query language. So far in the course, you understand in general what Azure Log Analytics is all about, and you understand how to set it up. Now it's time to actually start pulling meaningful data out of that to answer our monitoring needs. Well, as I've mentioned several times, the name of the query language is Kusto Query Language. Forgive me if you know more than I do as far as its pronunciation. I've heard some people call it Kusto, other people call it Kusto. It's one of those things. It's an eternal question. I need to one of these days contact somebody on that team at Microsoft and ask for what they think. If my history with them is any marker, they might be as confused as we are. They're all human beings after all. Another term to be aware of is Azure Data Explorer. The query interface goes by different names. Sometimes you'll see it listed as Log Search, other times Azure Data Explorer. It's a really nice application. And the underlying query language, again, the best we can tell, Kusto was the code name for the product, but the best we can tell, the actual query language is called Kusto Query Language, or KQL. And when you look at this code here, you might think, whoa, well, that looks pretty familiar to me. That's because the Microsoft developers who designed this language took a cue from Jeffrey Snover and Bruce Payat and the folks who developed PowerShell, or who invented the PowerShell language. They decided to create the syntax based on what is already familiar to many administrators and developers. Specifically, the Kusto Query Language is a mashup of the Splunk search processing language. If you're familiar with the Splunk monitor, we'll look at Splunk in the next module, actually. Of course, there's structured query language, or if you're using Microsoft's variant, Transact SQL for SQL Server. You have PowerShell itself, and even Bash scripting, especially the use of the pipeline. So look at this sample query, and you should be able to get a pretty good picture of what it's doing immediately just by looking at it. Tell me if you agree. First, we have the reference to a table. Remember, you have all of the different data coming in from your resources and from your management solutions, but the Azure Data Explorer surfaces those data types in a tabular way. So you reference the table, and then using the pipeline, you pass various clauses in. And the way that those clauses are structured, again, is very similar to SQL, really. Where is doing row level or horizontal filtering. And you can use various comparison operators. As you see here, you've got equal and greater than. You can do ands and ors and negations, all of that kind of stuff. And we're referencing in this example event level name and time generated. Those would be fields or virtual columns within the event table. And then we've got a bunch of built-in functions. We can summarize data. We can perform counts. We can look at top 10 in this case. So like I said, the idea is if you have some familiarity with structured query language, you'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on with that code just by inspecting it. In summary, this query is answering the question, what are our events that are errors that were generated more than a day ago? How many per computer? And show me the top 10 in descending order. That's what that's doing. Let's look at another example. How about if we're going into the performance monitor logs of one or more Windows Server machines? Same thing. We're running a couple where statements. There's an implied and here. So where object name is processor, counter name is percent processor time, where the time generated is between a particular time interval. And again, we're doing summarization here with average by computer, with time generated in 5-minute increments. And then check it out, render time chart. You can actually have the Azure Data Explorer give you graphics right out of the gate. By default, you'll get a tabular view, but you can show graphics right there. And then your export options are, well, CSV, you can export into Power BI. It goes from there. This is best shown in a demo. Let's get into a demo.